Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome friends once again to the MOOC courses of NPTEL on strategic trade and protectionism, theory and empirics. We are here on the week 7 lecture number 34, and where we are sticking to the analysis of non-tariff barriers. The most important content of non-tariff barrier is technical barriers to trade, and this forms the emerging strategies in the international market or international trade transaction in the present day's trade. So, therefore, this topic has huge relevance, and since the word technical is attached, different negotiations from the day of its inception have been made, but hardly a very minimum number of restrictions are actually traced, though are traced but not yet regulated in large number. So, we will discuss these things in this lecture. So, here it goes like with the topic called technical barriers to trade on this particular segment. So, let us understand some primitive, the certain premise relating to the TBTs, but before understanding the details of these premises, we need to ask ourselves certain important questions. Some questions are like here. I mean, if we can understand these questions, will be really good to understand technical barriers to trade in detail. So, first question is, what are the technical barriers to trade? What type? What are the aims of WTO agreements on those technical barriers to trade? Then the second one is on the difference between technical barriers to trade or SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Is there any difference between these two? So, we will also identify from our slides. Then what are the TBA agreements on non-discrimination on its provisions? So, basically what are the agreements on non-discrimination, and how the transparency is actually made in its different different agreements, and how the transparency is important as well. Is it good to have issues related to TBTs committees? Do you have a TBTs committee on the WTO, and who sits on it? Who are the members on the TBT committee? What are the issues it considers? How it is different than others? Or how it is actually relevant to the developing countries? Is it facilitating or what are the particular constraints faced by developing countries in the TBT area? So far as WTO Secretariat is considered, what kind of assistance does it provide? So, with these 8 questions, we are supposed to go into the depth of TBTs, and we will try to capture various facts, figures, arguments on TBTs in detail. So, though we have discussed some of these backgrounds in our previous lecture, but since this is again relevant, I have again emphasizing it. So, the prevalence of various types of non tariff measures, as we already discussed, actually vary by degree, by sectors, and sectors related to agriculture tend to be more regulated by SPS and export measures, especially agriculture sector. And the TBTs are used to regulate most economic sectors, and quantity and price measures, although used in many sectors, cover only much smaller percentage in the present days restrictions. SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary measures are typically applied to agriculture products, as I said, also other products that have inherent health hazards due to contaminations. So, TBTs are greatly used to regulate international trade in most of the sectors and concern the vast majority of the present days world trade. So, I mean, regarding some of the latest facts and figures, the regulatory framework related to technical and non-tariff measures actually differs by countries also, and those technical measures tend to be more pervasive in the especially in the European zone or European area, China, Brazil, Australia, and less so in many low income countries. Though those are emerging, so developed countries have already get the hold of those restrictions. So, now counting the developed countries use of these TBTs or measures related to TBTs, these tends to be more targeted to specific product. We need to count which are those specific product. Is it health related or is it environmental related? This applies also to China and Brazil. All the developing countries tend to use technical non-tariff measures in a more homogeneous manner. I mean, developed countries specifically target these to some of the sectors area specifically, whereas in developing countries uniformly target in different sectors. So far as WTO agreements on technical barriers to trade is concerned, this has I mean the TBT agreement has came into being or came into the force on 1st January 1995. The TBT agreement also strengthened and clarified the provisions of the standard codes. This has actually referred to standard codes, we will discuss in our next slides. The standard codes actually derived from 1979 Tokyo Round Agreement on technical barriers to trade, which govern certain regulations and standards. So, these are followed from the Tokyo and revised largely, but followed from 1979 Tokyo Round Agreement. Now, coming to the understanding of TBT and various concerns over time, this is the original document of WTO, World Trade Organization. Till the latest report of 2015, October 2015, from its inception from 1995, all those documents have been collated in that report. So, the report counts some of the facts like out of the total notifications, 25,000 in total, if you just count on 25,000 notifications submitted, 25,000 TBT notifications submitted to WTO by different member countries. So, now starting with not raised formally in TBT committee, not formally raised, you can understand here. So, or related to clarification requests from WTO members and inquiry point. So, these are all related to 25,000. Out of that 473, around 500 specific trade concerns, these are related to very specific concern called STC. These are the famous phrase used in famous acronym used in the TBT discussion. So, there are only out of 25,000 different kinds of notifications, complaints made by member countries to WTO, only 470 have been scrutinized. So, STC raised in TBT committee of this much, these are of with the bilateral consultations. Now, only out of 473, only 6 disputes brought to the WTO negotiations or discussion, only 6 so far. So, request formal consultations disputes finally is only 6. So, therefore, there is an pyramid inverse I mean inverted pyramid relating to the TBT concerns. What about TBT agreements over time? TBT related agreement is binding, is binding to all the members of WTO. No member can go beyond the binding agreements. Then the agreement actually consists of in total 15 articles and 3 annexes. So, to be noted down, 15 articles and 3 annexes. This covers imports from food to medical devices majorly. WTO members have notified, as I said, 25,000 draft regulatory measures to the Technical Barriers Committee over last 20 years since 1995. Out of that, 473 or 470 measures are considered to be the STC category. STC, as I told you here, this is on specific trade concerns category. So, 470 is in the STC specific categories, but only handful of these issues have resulted in formal disputes proving the effectiveness of the committee, that is only 6. We have already emphasized. In 1995, the year when this was developed, this was established, WTO was established, the members notified around 400 trade measures to TBT committee, with 20% of these notified by developing, only 20% by developing, whereas rest 80% by the developed countries. While in 2014, 2,200 measures were notified. Just the reverse, 2,200 measures are notified by the developing countries, that is 80% from developing countries in the recent times. Now, this can be explained with the help of diagram. Committee consists of WTO members, these committee which we are referring to where the TBT agreements are taken place or have taken place. These members, this is a unique multilateral forum for the discussion of standards and regulation affecting trade. So, it is very important. As I told you, how many 2,200 from the look at this. So, this is developed countries, this is in blue color, developed countries is 2 less, whereas the middle one is from the developing country in the recent years, which is around 80% of the total complaints or the notifications. Least developed countries again consist of very less percentage. Now, look at the 1995 where this is only 20%, developing countries of 20%, this is 80%. Now, just the reverse. Now, there has been exponential rise in the complaint rates from the developing countries. So far as some technicalities are concerned, since we are writing the term called technical barriers to trade. What do you mean by technical? Technical means certain aspects which are involved to applied and in industrial sciences. What are the technicalities then? We need to talk about the technicalities in terms of certain sectors, but certainly these are not covered specific to services. Then purchasing specification prepared actually by government bodies for production or consumption requirement of government bodies, and also SPS agreement. In the next lecture we will be discussing SPS agreement, and these technicalities are now referred to those segment. Now, technical aspects are actually relating to national or international legislations or specific to the international standards. So, these are actually set for quality, the standards set for quality products, various protocols for application, security, scrutiny and approval processes, etc. Over the past 20 years, it has developed a 3-pronged approach to its work. 3 prongs specifically in through 3 aspects are notification related, then trade cooperation related, and third one is trade conscience. So, notification, conscience and trade cooperation, 3 aspects have been emphasized. Now, it has been discussed that TBT agreement distinguishes 3 categories of measures broadly. Those are technical regulations, technical standards and conformity of assessment. We will also discuss in a short while. Conformity assessment are actually going to be very or have been very useful for the developing countries. We will discuss in another slides. So, these agreements clearly distinguish, TBT agreements clearly distinguishes technical regulations, standards related regulations or standards or conformity assessment. We will verify this. Now, so far as this chart is concerned, we have simply just now said technical regulations, standards, then conformity assessment. There are 3 important aspects on the right panels, which documents the area by which these are applied. We will discuss SPS in detail in the next class when we will talk about SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So, in technical regulation, let me read out a document that lays down product characteristics or their related processes and production methods, including the applicable administrative provisions which compliance is mandatory. So, I mean related to basically products, methods, procedures and the administrative provisions related to these and its compliance is mandatory. Where is the TBT? Let me clarify here all those 3. So, what I said just now is very important, very important because of the fact that we need to count down the technical let down related to production methods, processes, and the compliance related to the administrative procedures are very important. These compliance might be on terminology, symbols, packaging, marking, labeling requirements. So, very clearly identified. So far as standards are concerned, some of the standards are set in one country may not be standards similar to another country. So, it is the WTO agreements which make the standards harmonized or sometimes standards as uniform. Standards are approved by recognized body as I just said, which is responsible for establishing rules related standards, guidelines, characteristics for products or related processes and production methods. So, here the compliance is not mandatory, compliance may not be mandatory, but in the previous one compliance is mandatory, is very clearly written. So, they may also deal with terminology, symbols, packaging, marking, labeling requirements etc., but relating to the standard the member countries are not mandatorily following. So, therefore, some developing countries may take the advantage on it. So far as conformity assessment is concerned and its procedures are concerned, these are used to determine relevant requirements in technical regulations or standards. They include procedures for sampling, testing, inspection, evaluation, verification, assurance of conformity, registration, accreditation, approval. These are largely actually lacking in developing countries. So, therefore, the conformity assessment procedures is specifically targeted or actually given certain leverage to the developing countries. Now, let us come to the objective of the TBTs. The objectives are the following: mainly it protect human, animal or plant life of or health or the environment. The objective is to improve also efficiency of production, facilitate international trade, encourage international standards or conformity assessment systems. So, assessment system must be conformed with the required qualitative or infrastructure. So, it minimizes, objective is to minimize obstacles to international trade with respect to technical regulation and standards. So far as so far as another objective is concerned, it prevents discrimination between countries or among the countries. respecting countries for their measure for protecting its essential security interest. And last one, which is very important relating to the TBTs, and its objective is to have international standardization, which can make transfer of technology from developed to developing countries, assisting developing countries by developed countries in achieving technical regulations. So, there are certain key aspects of the agreements. These are discussed here in brief. Some key aspects like non-discriminative measures, it has international standard bodies through standard bodies are the usually the member countries and avoidance of unnecessary trade barriers. Therefore, this is very important. Setting international standards for the standard of the labels or maybe procedures. Some standard codings are very important for international transaction. Last but not the least aspect of agreement is on transparency. Whatever the standard we set, it must be transparent enough in WTO discussions. So, relating to the transparency requirement, we refer to the WTO report on TBTs. So, there are here it follows like this. There are 9 procedures to be followed. First one is drafting of the measure. The measure which is taken, that has to be properly drafted. Publication of a notice should be given. Notification to other member countries. Other member countries should also be given if we have any measure to be taken. Provision of copies to be given. Discussion of the comments, end of the comment period. These four requires minimum of 60 days time. So, now we can understand how the procedure consumes time. Adoption of those measures, then publication of the measure and entry into the force of the or effectiveness of this project again requires minimum of 6 months. So, 6 plus 2 months, 8 months minimum mandatory requirement is required to make it more transparent. So, these are the procedure followed in WTO agreements, especially on TBTs. So far as STCs are concerned, specific technical concerns are concerned. Specific, we have already noted down 473 STCs are identified in different agreements. Now, look at the latest from this 20 years time, 2014. Here the developing countries portion are highlighted by this is by both developed and developing countries, and this is purely by developed countries, and this is highlighted by least developed countries. Now, there are the STCs also jointly formed by developed and developing countries. This is captures huge percentage. So far as number of STCs are concerned, in 2014 only 45 plus nearly 50 STCs are noted. In total 473 in last 20 years, as I already mentioned in our previous slides. So, this is roughly around 4. This is, if I add all those, it will be around 473. All right. So, now understanding the regulatory practice life cycle of TBT measure, we should actually stick to this particular diagram. This diagram where we have been emphasizing. I will simplify. Let me understand this. Okay. We have this slide to discuss in detail. So, accordingly, I will emphasize here. Now, what I have tried to understand the regulatory practice to the life cycle of TBT measure. We have already seen that 8 months is required to make it more transparent. Now, I start with here. Start of regulatory life cycle in the TBTs agreements. There are preparation to be made, then adoption, then application. Out of all those time period, preparation, adoption and life cycle. But in between, for preparation, establish the need of the government intervention, identify alternatives, then assesses the alternatives, then consultation in different bodies, consultation with the member countries, adoption, then guidance and compliance to it, and technical assistance, or last but not the least to understand this is through the monitoring and review of the implementations. So, how it takes from preparation: publish a notice, anticipated regulatory activity, or give the early notice, then TBT notification to WTO of proposed regulation, I mean WTO notifications. This requires to get comments or accounts 60 days for public to comment on proposed regulations. So, 60 days is proposed to get the comments. Then after that 60 days it has to be followed for another procedure to get it published, or to get the regulation related consent, discussion or notification at least, or to get it effective through the different rounds or negotiations, or through, or for its proper compliance, it requires 6 months time, we have already discussed. So, this is all about the regulatory life cycle, which is very important for TBTs. So far as some of the complaints, complaints and negotiation or disputes are concerned. First one is related to cloves cigarettes by Indonesia, which used to be exported to basically exported to US. Now, United States measures affect, basically this is on United States measures affecting the production and sales of clove cigarettes. So, the complainant he is here Indonesia. Indonesia complained on this matter, specifically on US clove cigarettes. There are certain problems related to production and sales of clove cigarettes. So, request for consultation was made on 7th April 2010. And it has a dispute number DS 406. And similarly, Canada is another complainant on seals product. European communities measures prohibiting the importation and marketing of seals product. So, this one 2009. Similarly, US cool raised by complaint by Mexico. It is US clove cigarette, not Indonesian one. So, Indonesia was the importer for it and then raised the complaint, and here US cool complaint raised by Mexico and Canada jointly. Another one is on tuna fish, specially related to marketing, sales restrictions. Another one sardine fish by European communities, trade description of sardines were attached. Now, these are some of the cases and complaints I am presenting before you, and we are referring to the document of WTO and TBTs. Last discussion in this particular lecture is very important, and how it is important for developing countries. So, we will certainly emphasize here one by one once again. One significant challenge that developing countries have been facing are in the area of actually quality infrastructure, quality infrastructure specifically on confirmatory assessment, which we said how to assess the quality of the product. Do you have the sample testing procedures correctly in the developing countries? So, let me mention it here. Agreements helps in assessing the conformity assessment infrastructure. Sometimes this refers to quality infrastructure as well. And this is in fact in terms of both its regulatory and physical dimension. So, for developing countries, it is useful because this will help in regulatory as well as for its physical aspects. And so, for example, looking at access to bodies, that those are national or regional, that have competence in the areas of metrology, testing, certification, and accreditation, which may be recognized internationally. So, the product in all those categories, certification which could be recognized internationally, are actually getting a great help for the developing countries due to these agreements specifically on developing countries. A lack of appropriate infrastructure that can harm trade competitiveness is found located in developing countries members. Especially this is essential for SMEs, because largely these are unaccounted in developing countries, and these sector may face substantial difficulties in demonstrating compliance with requirements related to export markets, whether developed or developing countries, but for specifically for SMEs it is very essential. And given this capacity constraint, a country could find itself implementing a very trade restrictive policy compared to countries with more resources. So, simply because it is only feasible way of addressing. I mean, basically what it says, since the developing countries are lacking all those standards, all those confirmatory or conformity assessment related aspects, or quality checks aspect, or quality infrastructure are missing, these developing countries has a privilege of restricting a product or on these particular channels. So, therefore, the developing countries have been getting benefit in raising restrictions through this particular channel called confirmatory assessment. So, this helped greatly to the developing countries largely. Now, now what I wanted to say in another 1 minute discussion. So, here we largely talked about what is TBT, what are the technical resources attached with TBT, how much procedures it takes to get one notifications accepted and compliant by another countries, at least 8 months, which I already said. What are the procedures followed, we will discuss. Then broadly it accounts for 3 aspects. Standardization is there, technical details must have been clarified, and then standardization, then assessment, confirmatory assessment must have been discussed. And out of all those cases, we have seen in the early period, developing countries couldn't able to raise those concerns, but now 80% concerns are from developing countries so far as the 2014 document is concerned. So, with these we have discussed so many aspects of TBTs. We will expect or some of the questions from this session, and so the next class will be purely on sanitary and phytosanitary measures. With this, I think I should stop here. Thank you.